Well, boys and girls, it's time to talk about our next habitat. Before we do our habitat, let's review our continents. Earth has 7 continents. I can name them all. North America, South America, Europe, Asia, Africa, Australia, Antarctica. Now, the last time we talked about a habitat, we talked about the oceans. And there are 5 different oceans in our Earth. They're the big oceans that we will talk about. We have the Pacific Ocean, the Arctic Ocean, the Atlantic Ocean, the Indian Ocean, and the Pacific Ocean again. So I suppose you would say there are 4 main oceans, but there are a couple other bodies of water that maybe we'll have a chance to talk about another time. For now, we need to move on to our next habitat, which is the prairie. So I hope you have your habitat book and your prairie sheet. Now, I loved coloring this one because it's really going to help you understand what's so important about prairies in our world. Now, what are some things you notice in our prairies? Well, the first thing I see is the beautiful blue sky. Prairies are known for being big and open. That means that when you see a prairie, you're not seeing towns or houses. You are standing there and all you can see is land in front of you, mostly flat land. You see, prairies are made up of big open blue skies, some rocks, and then tons of grasslands, tons of grass and occasional boulders and a lot of dirt. Now, we read a special story together in class about prairie dogs. Do you remember that story? It was one of my favorites. That was a good story. And prairie dogs live in the prairie. So let's talk about what we know about the prairie. We know that the prairies are like grasslands. That means that a grassland or savanna has tons of rain in the summer and then some really hot days. It rains and then the sun comes out and there aren't any clouds, and that is what makes big grasses grow. Now, something special about the prairie is that there are no trees. In fact, if you saw a prairie, you would see a lot of bushes and grasses and perhaps some shrubs on the ground like bushes, but you wouldn't see any tall trees, okay? And part of the reason for that is because of the heat in the summer from the sun. So what kind of animals live in the prairie? Well, badgers and beavers, because there are rivers that flow through the prairies, and bison and buffalo, and rabbits and coyotes, and elk and deer, and of course prairie dogs. There are tons of different animals and lots of different kinds of birds that live in a prairie. Maybe you could watch a movie about a prairie or look up some pictures. Now, let's talk about what they eat. When it comes to food, a lot of the little animals like rabbits or prairie dogs, they eat grasses and weeds and shrubs and things on the ground in the prairie. But then there are the bigger animals. Elk still eat grasses and roots and things like that, but coyotes, they eat the rabbits or their prairie dogs. Now, what I'd like you to do is grab your question sheet. Excuse me. Grab your question sheet, okay? You ready to answer these questions? All right, number 1. What is the weather like there? Do you remember? We just talked about it. What is the weather like there? Why don't you push pause and write it down, okay? Did you say that the weather was very hot in the day, but also rained in the summer? That is what a prairie is like. Now, who lives here? Why don't you push pause and go ahead and write out who lives in a prairie? Well, we talked about tons of different animals that live there, but I'm sure maybe you even thought of some that I didn't mention. And last question, what do they eat? All right, I want you to make sure that you answer these questions. Don't forget, keep this sheet with your prairie sheet so you don't lose it, so we can make it into a book at the end of the week. Come back tomorrow and we're going to talk about the desert.